I know that. But, you know, they've got to be paid for. And the hospital is smaller than what we had it in the city. And to me, that's a far older hospital to work on, because that's so spread out and banged about. But there you go, you've got a lot of things without sort of problems in. And if that traffic, if the other hub comes, that's good.
I think this would be a perfect chance for this gentleman to speak.
Carry on, my man.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors. I just wanted to say a little bit on the medical side of things while it just comes into the frame. I'm Dr. Sunil now. I'm a consultant cardiologist at Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. And I just wanted to say a little bit about how healthcare currently is and how the lack of provision for all these developments has impacted on what we're currently seeing and how it's only going to continue to get worse. So for most of 2014, Norfolk and Norwich Hospital struggled with capacity and lack of beds. For the last 3 months, the hospital has been on various colours of alert, from orange alert, red alert, black alert, gold alert, depending on just how few beds there are. And on one extreme occasion over the Christmas period, they declared a major incident, which is where all routine operations are cancelled to allow the services to be diverted towards emergency work. Now, major incidents are a procedure that's usually reserved for rare occurrences, like you've got a terrorist attack or you've got a plane which falls out of the sky into the village. And essentially you need to divert everything you've got, all the surgeons you've got, into theatre, fix the wounds, fix the limbs, stem the bleeding. But due to the sustained, relentless increase in demand on the hospital we've seen in recent times, they had no other option but to do that. Now, if we think in Norfolk as a whole, we've been new to the area and we've been looking at houses to buy, and we've looked at various different areas, and of course what that highlighted was a number of huge housing developments there's been. So there's been the ones here: Queen's Hill, Cosy, Heatherset, Wyndham, Little Melton, Blowfield, Brundle, Cringleford, Thorpe St Andrew, Cromer, Dereham, Cosy, Chapel Brake, Little Plumstead, Attleborough, Poringland, Framlingham Earl, Mulbarton, Sprouston, Swaffham, Fakenham, North Walsham, Wroxham, Great Yarmouth, Wells, and recently 1800 proposed at Long Stratton. And those are just the big major developments. Now, despite all these extra houses and increase in the population, the hospital remains exactly the same size. Now, at some point in our lives, we will all require the services of the hospital. We may not all require a school, we may not even all require the road if we don't have a car. We just need a footpath for walking, but we will all need the hospital. Whether it's good news because you've got the birth of your child or your grandchild, bad news, family member dies, diagnosis of cancer, heart disease, dementia. Yet, in all these plans that get through, there is no provision made to increase the size of the hospital or the number of beds. We frequently see on the news how all the ambulances are stacked up at the hospital. And that's because they can't unload patients out of the ambulance into A&E because A&E is full. A&E can't get the patients out of A&E onto the wards because the wards are full. And we can't get people out of the hospital because there's no community care to people who need rehabilitation or just that little bit extra before they're fit enough to go home. The whole thing grinds to a halt like the Longwater Junction does. As you mentioned, the hospital opened in 2002. It was already a scaled-down hospital from the one it replaced, on the presumption it was going to be a paperless hospital. And as I'm sure you will see when you go to the hospital, we all still sit there with the bowels.
I sat on the planning committee that approved that.
Yeah. I frequently hear from neighbours and patients they've got difficulty in getting timely appointments with their GP. 3 weeks for Roundwell, even more. Recently I heard that Roundwell are losing a couple of their doctors, so that's going to get even worse now. They've got capacity apparently for 15,000 patients, so they've got capacity to build, to get more patients in, but actually they don't have GPs to fill those spaces. And if you think about the capacity they've maybe got about an extra spare 2,000 places. By the time Queen's Hill's finished and Hamptons is finished, that'll be at full. Only last Friday on Radio Norfolk, the practice manager from Watton Surgery, Mary Osborne, spoke of the problems and major development that they've seen, and a result of which 1,600 of their patients were deregistered and taken off the GP lists, as well as them closing to new patients because they can't fill their 3 GP vacancies. There are 56 GP vacancies in Norfolk currently, and some of those have been vacant for more than 2 years. It takes more than 10 years to train a GP and more than 20 to train a hospital consultant. There's nationally a shortage of these healthcare professionals and a big recruitment problem for Norfolk. So for our particular development, there are 154 documents on the South Norfolk Planning website. Yet there are no reports from any of the health services, no provision for any health services, no mention of GP, dentist, hospital, community services, nor is there a report from social services. It's simply assured that a GP will be able to see you should you need to. That if you call an ambulance, it will be able to come and take you to the hospital. When you get to the hospital, there'll be staff and beds there to see you. But there's no plans in the proposal to make sure this expectation has any reality of any chance of remaining a reality. My personal view is that all the housing development should be put on a hold until there's been a commensurate and proportionate increase in hospital and healthcare provision to catch up with the massive new housing development that's already taken place. Thank you.
See, you're right, because if you ain't got the capacity of the doctors, where do the people go? They haven't got that health centre in the middle of the city. If they're this side of the city, A&E, here we come, and you're picking up, not being unkind, people who shouldn't really get to you. They should be seen by the doctors or whoever, but you know, that's the system we got, and that's the breakdown from start to finish. Because my daughter's in with amputees, she looked after amputees, and to get them home, to get the social services to alter the home enough for them to be able to go home is the hold up, and there's beds held up there as well. So the whole thing, well, we're in one hell of a mess, aren't we? To be honest, that's put it bluntly.
The problem is that we've talked about SIL contributions, community infrastructure levy. We've talked about section 106s. Healthcare provision isn't covered under those. They're required. Norfolk County Council, Strategic Planning Regulatory Committee, and indeed South Norfolk Planning Authority consider educational provision, lampposts, other infrastructure, drains, hydrants, street lights. All that is covered under a developer application, so that they are expected to provide that, which, when it is complete, is adopted by the County Council to maintain and service in perpetuity. Healthcare provision isn't covered, and the reason I've been told, because I've raised it many times, not only at County Council, but also at South Norfolk Council, with Tim Horsepole, who was there at your meeting last night, I assume, and indeed, was it?
No, Simon Marjoram,
Simon Marjoram,
Joe,
okay.
What's her name?
Hobbs.
Joe Hobbs, yeah, she was there. They left before the end of the meeting.
Yes, it was quite disgraceful.
But the problem is that local authorities, planning authorities, consider GP practices, medical centres as private businesses, and they are. Although you could argue that they come under the auspices of the NHS, and the NHS isn't a private business. It's actually funded by central government. So there is an anomaly there that simply because half a practice is owned by the senior partners, they pay into it. All right, it's theirs. When they retire, they get another senior partner to replace them, so they can get the money back. The other half of any proposal to build the medical centre comes from the PCT or the CCG now, the clinical commissioning groups. They fund it, and they have a formula. And I have been writing to the CCG and the PCT over many years, and in fact you might have seen it in the papers, where I've said that the allocation of funding from the CCGs in terms of individual practices is totally inadequate. For example, in a burgeoning community like Costessey, with Queen's Hills and Lodge Farm, the per capita rate from the CCG through the NHS for each patient is only £80. Now you've got another practice, North Ellen, let's take that for example, where they haven't any development proposals at all. It's a static community, and yet they get, according to the formula, £250 per patient. Now we have had problems here in terms of seeing doctors. We know that. I've complained to two of our councillors who are on the patient participation group. It has been resolved, but my answer to that was that if you increase the per capita allocation, then the practice could employ more doctors, and as a consequence of that, wouldn't have to go through the triage system, or indeed telephone diagnosis, which was introduced, is now being abandoned at the Roundwell Medical Centre. So there are a lot of issues involved in this, but one of the things you need to do, quite clearly, is to lobby your MPs, particularly, to include in any great development plan for an area, whatever it is, that healthcare provision is taken as part and parcel of a condition. Otherwise, it will just be the Cinderella side, and there will be exorbitant pressures on a local GP practice, or indeed as there is on the Roundwell Medical Centre. The problem is that even if you did now get additional funding, all right, £80, perhaps £100, £150, it's just been, incidentally, it's been rationalised, and you wouldn't believe this, but although we formerly had £80 per head here in Costessey, because they've now decided that there's going to be a new formula and everyone is going to be treated equally, rather than having the dichotomy of having North Ellen having 250 and we're actually receiving less than £80 now in the reorganisation. But the problem is, even if you do increase that formula funding for a particular GP practice or a medical centre, the consequence of that is you are enabled to employ more doctors, but unfortunately there aren't the doctors to go around, all right? Because they're not training enough. So it is a significant problem, and it's a circular argument. But we're getting away, actually.
Yeah, from what you can actually argue on.
If you've got the doctors here, they all finish up on their gentleman's doorstep. And then the seriously ill
that's true.
at a disadvantage. I mean, it's
Right, well,
like a shoe through people.
well, if you put them on the road, then that'll be the accident.
Yeah,
That'll be
and highways would say, oh, you've lost X number of people, because that's how they value us, as a commodity.
Reg?
Just make 2 points. One is the bus issue, I think, sums it all up for me.
Yeah.
This was promised long ago and we still haven't got it. So that just illustrates the rest. The other thing is that what is happening on the Section 106 agreement, etc., is that we, the council taxpayers, actually funding the developments, rather than they putting money into it and funding it and then getting it back later on. So what we should be requiring is for them to put the money up front, and then put the city infrastructure in, and then do it later. And so I think it's the finance behind it that struck me from what you were saying.
It's a disgrace.
Well, that's the case with Queen's Hills. You did have an infrastructure developer there who, all the other 7 developers put in £1 million to the infrastructure developer, all right, to provide the infrastructure for the development, but that developer went bust. And as a consequence of that, the other 7 developers lost their money.
And them 2 roads are still in business.
And yes, under another name.
That's true.
Yeah, but that's the scandal of it all, that the bureaucrats at the top here making the bucks don't care about us. You have a chance tonight to say no more.
Yeah, but if this goes South Norfolk, they'll let it go, because they don't want another appeal, because they know if they go to Bristol, that'll be passed.
No, we talked yesterday about the land bank. We've got more than 5 years. They can't use that one. We showed last night they've got, was it nine odd years worth of planning in place.
The thing
Yeah,
is,
but I did tell you the other week, anything go to appeal, at the moment the government said, I'll say it.
It might not at the moment because of this election and all the rest of it. It's your opportunity to say, at least if you say with Marlingford and ourselves, say no to this, please.
the thing is that Tim and I, between us, I think we spent 10 years working on the local development framework at South Norfolk Council, which was doing the allocations. And because of our proximity to Norwich, that's why we were indicated as areas for growth. And between us, we knew there was going to be a minimum of 1,000 houses.
1,800 floating.
And there's also this floating 1,800. So we knew what was going to happen because it was in the local development framework. We knew that Lodge Farm Phase 2 was always in the wings, wasn't it? Because that was built by bought by one single developer.
Yep.
Yes. And Easton, we knew, was going to had a site put forward. You talked last night about the consortium who put this site forward. But I mean, we can't interfere in, you know, your business.
No, we're not asking you to.
We will support
Yeah.
everything that we've mentioned about I believe council will support, because it's not a case of predetermining, because we've made comments
Already.
About that, because it affects us all. The fact is the joint core strategy has been adopted.
Yep.
And this is a plan until 2026. I think now it's going to be extended even further, isn't it? All we can do, unfortunately, in my opinion, is lobby as hard as we can to get the best that we can.
Or get rid of at the election all these councillors who have agreed to it. That would be a solution. Vote for the Greens. It's quite a scary thought, but, you know.
Reg, you've got another comment to it?
I was wondering, are we going to have an opportunity to say whether we support Easton in their position or not?
Time to think about that.
We're only a consultee.
Yes, but I mean, what's the point of coming this evening? Are we allowed to express an opinion on it through a vote?
I don't think we can say much about the actual development, but the
Not a thing.
road infrastructure and the rest of it we can.
Exactly
Because
right.
that affects us as, well, probably worse than Easton in a way, because all the traffic coming our way has got to bottle up here. But the other thing I was going to say, it'll be interesting what come out next month about the Northern Distributor, because the inspector said, where are the links to the southern bypass, didn't he?
Yeah. 3/4 of a road.
And
And
of
all
course,
they put up was the same as they put up 10 years ago, and more than half of them they cannot implement now because of building it up on where the roads are going. But if the Northern Distributor did come through, that would alleviate things a lot, because like the other one you had at Axton,
exactly.
the traffic
Yeah.
would then get out the other way.
There are 13 proposals, all right, at the moment. 4 of them impact on Costessey, the rest further down the road towards you. They've got to, in the future, identify a preferred route. And a lot of them come out between Easton and Honningham. But there are 4 that come out on the A1074. Yes?
Yes.
In Costessey. So in between Longwater Lane, all right, and the McDonald's roundabout, the Longwater interchange.
Yeah.
4 of them come out there. All right. It's incredible. But when they're thinking of bringing the Link Road, as I said, the second exit around the back of Carryfall and the MRF, Materials Recycling Facility, out onto the A1074, opposite the second entrance to Lodge Farm Phase 2, you can see that in an 800-yard stretch, they'll have absolute gridlock.
It'll be chaos.
It will be chaos. But John is right. If you had a complete northern bypass, not an NDR, you've got a 3/4 NDR, but you had a northern bypass coming out somewhere there, that would alleviate the problem. But one of the other issues, and that's what in the future again, one of the other issues, of course, is that will impact on your settlement, on your community, is the proposal for the food hub. All right?
Yeah.
And that's another massive development.
That's a huge battle.
All right.
People look for it.
Over 30 acres. That's
Yeah.
30 acres behind Easton Church.
Yes.
right, behind there.
30 acres are developed behind Easton Church. If you go, you know where Easton Church is, and then you go round left-hand bend, there's a straight bit of road, that field on your right-hand side, I'm right, aren't I? Yeah. And if they bring this Northern Distributor, if they bring it to the dip at Honningham, that link point, Nelson, thank you. Am I right?
Yep.
Yep. And Tim said about 4 coming out there road. There's even some of them come out Willie Frost Way, these Northern Distributor things. So you just see how far out of date and how ridiculous it is.
Yeah. Well, they're not using logic. There's no doesn't
There
seem
is
to be
not.
any
And
intelligence
although
there.
we've been talking about houses,
Yeah.
let's not forget that on Longwater there's the industrial estate,
Yeah.
which is nowhere near completed.
And the
yet.
retail park.
Yeah, and I'm stunned that
Which
people
are-
have even put forward teardrop roundabouts. Well, we know what's happened on the
Well, we've made
M6,
comments.
M1.
Yeah.
They've had to remove it completely because you cannot, on a teardrop roundabout, you cannot mix cars and lorries. That's been, everyone has been saying for so long.
There is, it's still in the melting pot. Whether it will be accepted or not, I don't know. But at the Longwater interchange, there is a proposal for a see-through roundabout that goes right across the A47
Yeah.
and back again. You know the see-through, but you have a loop.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing in the middle.
Right,
Yes,
do you want
yeah.
to?
So are we going to vote on this now?
Well, I think what
I think we'll just give it.
I think what, not that I'm predetermining anything myself, but from what we have agreed previously, we have serious concerns about the traffic situation.
Exactly right.
And I think as a council we would probably like to say that we could fully support putting in the infrastructure before there was any consideration.
Yes, and I think that's as far as we can go. And I think
That's as
that
far
was.
as we could
Yeah,
go.
I think that we have great sympathy with that, with
Yes.
Easton on that. The
Yes.
infrastructure should go in first, quite clearly.
Yes.
And I
We
still
would
think we
support.
should mention the medical side of it, because
Well, we could make, we
Yes,
we
we
could
can
make
make comment
comments.
on that,
yes,
because-
yeah.
Well, you could, except that it's not within the brief of the District Council.
At least it's read into record.
But it would be recorded.
if you've got the press man here, he can make the comment that the medical services are suffering because of, or the hospital is suffering. We're all suffering.
Yeah.
If you chuck the hospital up, anybody taken really ill and can't get in, well, they might say goodbye to us because of the lack of medical care outside the hospital.
Healthcare provision.
Yeah.
I mean, if the roundabout's chock-a-block and your ambulance can't get through to
I
Queen's
know,
Hill,
I mean,
it's good night, isn't it?
You can't get there.
you can only do what you can do with the building you've got. And if the building ain't man enough, and the other thing is when your building ain't man enough, you then got a job to get staff because your staff are always being, well, I don't know how you put it, but run to the ground in a way.
But people don't want to come to Norfolk to work as well. They're just and the recruitment problem is massive
Yeah.
for Norfolk.
Yeah.
Jerry,
Can I just say that when we built the first stage of Lodge Farm, we actually put in the infrastructure before they started building.
Yeah.
We put in a set of smart traffic lights, which if we hadn't have done, it'd be utter chaos
yeah,
around that area.
yeah.
So we actually
yeah,
did
well picked
foresee that
Yeah.
at that point.
That was
This
serious,
council
that was.
produced a hit list of 20 objectives.
Many people might not remember that the traffic lights at the top of Longwater Lane a few years ago weren't there. And that you had to go to the top of Longwater Lane and you had to
Close your
negotiate
eyes and go.
It's only a few years ago, but you negotiated it, didn't you,
I
Tim?
did, yeah.
That before they started work on Lodge Farm, the traffic lights had to be in place and the road widened. We sometimes forget about that, but I know you worked very hard on that Tim.
I did.
I think we
And
refer
that-
to these as trigger points, obviously, in the conditions.
Yeah,
And,
that's true.
obviously, some haven't gone right, we know at Queen's Hills, but there's some great examples there of where local intelligence to lobby to make sure these trigger points are at the right, because as you're quite rightly pointed out, they need to be at the earliest stages rather than later stages, and this council fought for some of the trigger points to be before any dwellings, Lodge Farm Phase 2. And that's the key, and because a lot of things that get recognised by the community are facilities, recreational, they all have attached trigger points to when they actually have to be in place. And as a local resident, you need to keep an eye on those, work with the developers to make sure they're up front, and then use initiatives like we've discussed.
The trouble is, you had
funding.
as I mentioned earlier, you had a trigger point of 40, 50 homes? What's happened at county level when that trigger point reached? Why did county not do something about it?
Well, I think you should probably know the story about the infrastructure developer going bust and the whole
It's
thing
already
just
said.
went on hold.
But it sounds
Yes.
like there was inept behaviour at county level to make sure that the money was secure.
Well,
No, we actually took out an injunction. South Norfolk District Council took out an injunction against the developers
Stop them building.
To stop them building,
Yeah.
all right, unless they delivered on their Section 106s. You can't. It's not the same as your development, but here you had 8 developers originally. The one was employed by the other 7 to provide the infrastructure, and that company went bust.
Yeah.
It was called Cofton, all right, and they've now and it went to an administrator. It was Deloitte up in Glasgow. They administered it and handed out the assets to another company that would take them on. And you know the company that took it on afterwards? Called
Leeds.
No, it wasn't. It was
Camland.
And Camland is an acronym for Cofton Asset Management. So the same company that went bust has now got the assets again given back by the infrastructure by the liquidator. So that was an exceptional situation. We couldn't do anything about it, and we've still got a problem because the roads on Queen's Hills haven't been built to an acceptable standard, so that the county council can adopt them and service them and maintain them. If they did it before they were up to that acceptable standard, a reasonable standard, then the council taxpayer, you, me, and everybody else, would be paying twice for the same job. And it's the developer who needs to provide that. And in this case, it was.
It's the point your councillor made was get them to put the money up, to finance it up front.
Just
I'm going to propose that we refuse this application on the grounds for lack of infrastructure because of the concerns we have about the medical provision.
I don't think it's up to us.
It's not up to us.
Well,
We can't refuse it.
We can make our comments.
Why is this then on the agenda?
Because we are consulted
We are
as a
consulted.
neighbouring
Yeah.
parish.
It's not, we
not our-
asked to be consulted actually,
Yeah.
because we worked with Easton so that we could make our comments. And our comments, I think Nigel has got them, in support of your...
What do they, just read them out.
So those comments, are you going to record those as supportive of the Eastern position?
What do they say?